Irregular verbs. They're the scourge of language learners, sending students screaming from classrooms, slamming shut textbooks in pain and agony. And as a language teacher, I can only tell you that you have to learn them. And often the best way to learn these, when you're learning a language grammatically at least, is by brute force, memorization. Well, maybe not. I have two things about this. One, if you learn what about the verb makes it irregular, then it becomes a little bit less so, and it's a lot easier to remember. And two, the more you see it, the more you'll be able to deal with the irregularity. So yes, practice. I'm talking about practice here. In this video, I will discuss the irregular verb sum esse, and not just its present tense conjugation, that's easy, but what about sum makes it irregular? Okay, so first the conjugation in the present tense, and it's probably best for me to just list them out. Sum is I am, es is you are, est is he, she, it is, sumus is we are, estis is you, plural, are, and sunt is they are. First, check out the pattern here. 3 words begin in an SU, and 3 words begin in an ES. Also note that the endings of these forms is actually pretty regular, especially if you know that the M is a regular ending for first-person singular verbs, like in the imperfect tense. The endings still go est, mus, tis, und. So it's just the verb stem, the first part, that appears to be irregular. So what's up with that? So you've seen sum esse before in its most basic sense, since it's often the first verb you ever run across in Latin. It connects 2 words, often a noun and another noun, or a noun and an adjective. Caesar est dictātor. Caesar is a dictator. Here, the est connects 2 nouns, Caesar, Caesar, and dictātor, dictator. Or Marcus est fortis, Marcus is strong, where the est connects a noun, Marcus, and an adjective, fortis. You can think of this verb as an equal sign, since it hooks together both parts of the sentence. And since it's an equal sign and the left and the right are the same, both sides will be in the nominative case. In sentences where the est or sunt begins a sentence, you would translate it with a there is or there are, like est pater, there is the father, or sunt puellae, there are the girls. You can also have sentences where the subject is inferred from the word. So sum means I am, so sum tertus means I am scared. So what do I mean when I say that sum esse is irregular? Well, Latin has 4, well, kind of 5, conjugations of regular verbs, and these are regular because they are conjugated in predictable ways that fit a pattern. If I tell you that a verb like laudo, laudare is first conjugation, then you should be able to use your knowledge of that conjugation and verbs like laudo to give all of its forms. The endings of laudo will be predictably similar to those of another first conjugation verb like amo. We determine the conjugation of a verb by looking at its second principal part, the vowel before the RE, and the length of the vowel matters, identifies the conjugation number. But what conjugation is sum esse? Its second principal part doesn't even have an RE, and that's a sign that sum is irregular and won't be easily grouped. But what if I told you that sum wasn't really that irregular after all? Okay, let's rewind just a bit and go back to infinitives. We have a first conjugation infinitive like amare, and let's put that right next to our esse. They both end in an E, but esse ends in an SE, and amare ends RE. Okay, so here's the kicker. The infinitive in Latin actually ends in an SE, like an esse, but when the S is surrounded by 2 vowels, it changes into an R through a process called rhoticization. Now, don't worry too much about this. What you really should take from all of this is that esse is perfectly regular as an infinitive. And to form the verb stem, we can just take off the SE, just like taking off the RE works for regular verbs. And so our verb stem is an ESS. Now let's put our endings onto the verb stem, s plus s, to, mus, tis, und. And say this first one out loud, essum, essum. You can almost have to put a U in there when you pronounce it. Okay, let's move over to the first person plural, esmus. Again, esmus. That U just has to be there. And finally, the third person plural, essunt, essunt, has the same mysterious U sound. So why don't we just put the U in there? And one more thing, when we add this U, we can take away the E at the beginning of the word. Why make this word longer than it needs to be? Okay, so those are half of our forms. What about the other 3? We have es, est, and estis. Wait, there's no need to add a U because these endings just work. They fit in with the stem. And while we're at it, let's just make that double S in the second person singular into a single S. Yeah, because we can. Well, can you really hear a double S when you pronounce it? And wow, that's it. That's the present tense of sum. It's not so scary when you learn a little bit about why it's irregular. So why is sum irregular, while amo amare, to love, is not? It boils down to the age and importance of the verb. Sum is probably the oldest and most basic verb, since it's just a linking verb that connects two nouns. But it's also probably the most important. It is the most common verb in Latin literature, and especially since it's used in forming many other different tenses for other verbs. And really, can you imagine a language without to be? Languages in general tend to go from complex to simple as they grow in size and age. For one reason, because it's so hard to deal with a lot of irregularities in a language with tens or hundreds of thousands of words. But one very important word that is irregular will stay irregular simply because it's used all the time and becomes ingrained in a language. So just for kicks, here's the very old Indo-European reconstruction of to be. Now remember, Latin originally came from a language about 6,000 years ago that we call Indo-European or Proto-Indo-European. We don't really know what this original Indo-European language looked like, and that's why we begin these forms with an asterisk. But we can make very educated guesses based on how its daughter languages like Latin and Sanskrit and English have evolved. And don't worry too much about all of the weird stuff here. That's for linguists. But if you look really closely to this conjugation of this verb, this ancestor of sum, you can really see the beginnings of our Latin verb.